All right. What are we starting with, Corey?
I'm just trying to get my hair sorted. That's what we're starting with.
I'm going to guess we're going to start with a nice Wii review.
Yes, we're starting with a nice Wii review from the United States of America.
Wow.
America.
Yeah. So this one says, great find. I'm traditionally a history person and science never really made a ton of sense to me, but the guys do such a great job at talking through things in a funny and truly understandable way. Such a good show.
Wow.
Yeah. And that one is from Darby Latting.
Thanks, Darby
Thank
Latting.
you.
Thank you, Darby Latting.
The American historian and science convert.
Shall we start the show?
Let's start the show.
Let's start the show.
Hello and welcome to the SCI GUYS, a show where we talk about the crazy, weird, and wonderful stories from the science world. I'm Corey, and as always, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Jamp and Luke on Earth.
Luke on Earth.
Look on Earth.
If you don't get that reference, head over to the SCI GUYS Twitter.
Oh, because the captions.
It's
Yes.
Jeff. It's actually Jeff and Luke on Earth.
Is it
Jeff.
Yep,
The
Jeff.
thing is, the subtitles always get my name as Jeff.
Really?
The audio subtitles. Every time it's Jeff.
Wow. Maybe you should change your name to
I
Jeff.
should just change my name to Jeff.
So this week, we are talking about feelings and feelings and feelings on feelings.
Feelings.
Damn.
This week, we're talking about synesthesia. You guys have heard of synesthesia, right?
Synesthesia, yes.
Yeah, I'm going to try and not say it very often because synesthesia is actually a very difficult word to say.
Synesthesia.
Yeah, synesthesia.
Synesthesia.
No, I get what you mean.
Synesthesia. Yeah, you got to stretch your face.
Synesthesia.
So do you guys know what synesthesia is?
Yeah.
It's something to do with visualizing sound.
In part, yes.
In part.
Where your senses cross over into other senses.
Yeah, basically. It's like kind of like crossed wires between your senses. So if you were to say, you could associate, the most common one is, say, associating numbers with colors. So when you see a number, there's a color that it has,
Right.
even though that it doesn't actually have a color.
It's so good. My friend Dottie has this.
Oh, yes.
And I ask her like quite a bit. I'm like, so what color is 6? And she's like, 6 is this color. I'm like, wow, did you just know that? You just know that.
You just know that sixes are brown. That's obvious. It's obvious to you. Yeah.
It's amazing.
So synesthesia, it's a neurophysiological trait in which basically stimulating one sense results in you automatically experiencing another sense. So it's not just associating, say, sixes with brown. To follow that example, it's seeing sixes and experiencing the color brown, if that makes sense.
Yes, but
right.
not seeing the color brown, experiencing the concept.
Yes,
color brown.
Experiencing the concept of brown. It's not like you look at a 6 and it
Weird.
looks brown. It's more a case of you look at a 6 and it's as though you're looking at a 6 that is brown. If that makes sense.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Is this something that just manifests and there's no correlation between 6 and brown? Or will the
no.
person have to
Yeah, do people
will the
have...
person have to associate brown with 6 in order to start visualizing 6 as brown?
I
that
think
makes
the
sense.
question Jam's trying to ask is,
Yeah.
do people with synesthesia agree on the correlations between numbers?
Oh, I didn't even get that far.
So
They do not.
is there something inherent about 6 being, for example,
sixes
brown?
aren't brown. No, I've made.
Okay.
I've
I
made
was
that
talking
up.
about the individuals. I didn't even think that
don't-
people could collectively agree.
So there's not really a collective agreement as of
Right.
yet on whether sixes are brown or not. Sixes can be
Further
any
study is needed.
any
We
6
need
can
a
be any
meta-analysis.
color. All 6s are for all people. No, no, there's no sort of correlation. There's no overarching. Each color, each number fundamentally has a color. It's unique to the individual, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as for where that color comes from, we'll get into it a little bit later, but it's quite complex. The thing is that we don't understand very much about synesthesia, which is why this is another one of those episodes where I've got to put my hands and say we just don't know, because we just don't know a lot. It's one of those things. It's just very confusing, and obviously it's very interesting. So why don't we get on into it?
Spoiler alert,
crack
there will be
on.
very little content in this episode.
Well,
Mainly banter, very little.
Come on,
science.
James, we've got to gear it up this time.
no, please don't. I've got content. I planned around this. No, okay. So synesthetes. Synesthete is a word for someone who has synesthesia. So your friend Dottie is a synesthete, which is
I'll
really
let her know.
Synesthete.
Shall I
just
call
making
her
the
now?
word.
Yeah, give her
More
a ring.
complicated.
Let her know right now.
You're a synesthete.
What did you call me? Sounds like a
Friendship's
slur.
over. Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Kind of does.
I don't know. It sounds like to me, synesthete sounds like have you ever heard of like the Tomorrow People? It sounds like a group from a from some sci-fi story where
I can see that.
they have some superpowers. So it's like these are the
The
synesthetes.
synesthetes.
Like the mutants, the synesthetes, whatever. That's what I think
Yeah.
synesthete sounds like. So I
Definitely like
wouldn't
an-
recommend saying it to your friend.
Definitely an alien race in like Star Trek or like Marvel or something.
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And maybe synesthetes are. We just don't know. Again, we just don't know.
Somewhere.
They could not be human. I don't know. So synesthetes can hear colors, feel sounds, and taste shapes. But what makes it different from sort of drug-induced hallucinations is that synesthetic sort of relations are consistent. So if you were to take sort of psychedelics, you might be able to look at sixes and see that all sixes are actually red. But you take psychedelics again, you might find out that actually no, you were wrong. They could be green. Whereas if you're whereas if you've got synesthesia, sixes are always whatever color you originally saw them as.
Right.
That makes sense.
So you
Okay.
you don't necessarily agree between synesthetes, but you do agree with your past and future self.
Yes.
You don't change your mind later on.
No, you don't. It's not. It's
Wow.
it's consistent.
So it's something inherent to the way that your brain is mapped out, then, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it's not like you constantly see different numbers as different colors. Each number has a color in the same way. The concept of the number 6 is consistently represented by the number 6. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I was to
Yes.
write down a 6, that always means 6 to me. I'm not going to suddenly use the number
Yeah.
3 to represent the
Yeah.
the concept of 6 in my head.
Yeah.
It's
That'd be a great excuse if you did bad on the maths exam.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
I've just changed the concept of six.
numbers changed quite a lot. I meant the right answer every
So,
time.
while I've written the Arabic numeral 3, that actually represents the concept of the correct answer.
You could even take that all the way to essays.
Yeah, you
You could
could.
just write a nonsensical essay and then tell your teacher, I've just changed the definitions of these words because I feel like the concepts don't
I've
align
written it in
anymore.
code, and it's your job to decode what I've written.
This is simply, it
Crack
may
out
look
Enigma.
simply like the letter A to you, but actually, it's an entire thought process that I've thought out. You need to figure out what it means. There you,
You
go.
see, sir, I used an Enigma machine to write this entire essay.
I mean, if it was a computing essay, then sure, go ahead and do that. You could get away with that, I'm sure. But yeah, so synesthetes, the connections that they've got are highly consistent. It's genetically linked, and it apparently affects between 2 to 5% of the general population. So,
That's a pretty common
Decent.
thing, then.
yeah, I mean, 6 to 15% of each of us. 6 to 15% of any one of us is a
Is my-
synesthete.
The bottom of my leg.
Yes, exactly.
He can see colors.
I don't know how that. I don't know if that maths works out, but but yeah. So as I said, people are called synesthetes. It appears during early childhood, and there's some debate as to whether everyone is born a little bit synesthetic or not. Again, we don't know. So some people think that everyone is a little bit synesthetic when they're born, and it's kind of more of a scale, or you lose it as you grow up. But others think that it's something that only exists among synesthetes. And in some cases, you can develop synesthesia later in life, like I said, either through using psychedelic drugs, but that would be temporarily. But you can also get it through meditation, sensory deprivation, or from, and this one would be permanent. You could get it from head trauma, strokes, or brain tumors as well.
Ah.
Yeah. So I mean that makes sense because head trauma, strokes, brain tumor, they're all things that sort of mess with your brain in a way and would probably change the way that it's
Yeah.
structured. I mean, we spoke about the man who had the iron spike through his head, Phineas Gage.
Yeah.
And his brain kind of restructured around the big gaping hole in it. So, I mean, it did.
As it had to.
I mean, yeah, you would. It's like, adapt to survive or die with a massive hole in your head. It's like you don't have much choice.
No, we've moved on. We don't need this part of the brain.
Brains are incredibly good at doing that. Supposedly, you can. So, for example, something I read, which may be unscientific, I'm not sure, can't remember the source, but something I read about was that your brain gets lazy, especially in older age. Sometimes it takes not the best path. The data doesn't take the best path, it just takes the easiest path. So, for example, if you lose your hearing in older age, it could be that we could later on, through research, develop ways to encourage the brain to wire itself in a way that is better tuned for speech better tuned for hearing in a less lazy way, so that the sound, as long as you don't have damage to the actual eardrum or any kind of the apparatus inside your ear, if the data could get to the part of your brain that processes sound in a better way, then you could regain some of your hearing. Does that stack up?
So that would make sense if the hearing loss was due to a change in the brain pathways, but I'm not sure if hearing loss in old age is due to that. It's probably more due to physical wear and tear.
Yeah.
But there are some cases. I'm pretty sure there's some cases where actually there are issues with basically there's sort of differences in the way that your brain is structured that mean that you lose the acuity or the sense altogether. And in that case, just sort of rewiring the way that the brain works would basically solve that effectively.
Yeah, I remember reading something. I can't remember whether it was. It may have been. So, disclaimer: it may have been an unscientific source. I think it may have been the Joe Rogan podcast.
The most scientific source, and perhaps second only to this podcast in terms of scientific sources.
He sometimes has actual scientists on his podcast.
I was going to say he's had Brian Cox on. We haven't had Brian Cox on our podcast.
We don't need Brian Cox. We got me.
True.
I'm
Who
worth
needs a
10
Brian? No one needs a Brian.
Anyway, whatever the source was, I remember, because you're talking about psychedelics there, about getting synesthesia, and what psychedelics do, I think, is they increase the crosstalk between areas of your brain. So bits of your brain that would normally talk to each other normally wouldn't talk to each other are then talking to each other. And there was this, again, anecdotal, so non-scientific story of a guy who had he was older and he had very poor hearing, and he took a high dose of a psychedelic, and he could hear like tiny little scratching noises when he lay on the floor, and he could see across the floor right in front of him little bugs crawling along the floor, and he was lying on the floor and he could hear the little feet scratching along the floor.
Yeah,
was
I
it
remember
ants?
this. Yeah.
So I don't know if this is true. This is an entirely anecdotal story. He was also on a hallucinogenic drug, so could have been hallucinating those noises. But I think the theory went that it could have been that his ear was that the pathways from his ear to his auditory system, whatever it's called, in the brain, were going in a different route and had found a route that allowed him to hear better.
Okay.
Don't know. But that's interesting, because it's essentially like synesthesia. I'm guessing from a very low level understanding of this, and I'm sure you will tell us more accurately later on, that like the center of the part of the brain that deals with the concept 6 and the part of the brain that deals with the concept brown, in our example, are in synesthetes linked up by a neuron pathway that in like a person without synesthesia, those two concepts aren't linked up. Mm-hmm. There isn't a communication between them from a neuron pathway.
As someone that isn't a neuroscientist, and I have to say explicitly, I'm not a neuroscientist, so my understanding of the brain is obviously limited by that.
Yeah.
But that makes sense in that it's effectively different parts of the brain. There's different theories, but in some of them there's sort of different parts of the brain that sort of light up, and in some cases there's sort of overlap between. So you get the input stimulus.
Yeah.
That would normally light up the part that lights up, say, 6. But in the case of a synesthete, they're either through cross connection or through interference or something like that, it also lights up, say, brown.
This is similar to photic sneezing as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which we talked about last week.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
You have a crossover between the part of your brain that deals with light and the part of your brain that deals with the sneeze reflex.
Yeah.
And when you have a high amount of light coming in, that translates to a high signal ratio that jumps across to the sneeze reflex and makes you sneeze.
I think what's interesting about this is that people seem to not understand or not know a lot, is that the world that you experience is not actually the world that is out there. Your brain is playing a lot of little tricks on you
it's
all
like
the time.
It's best interpretation of what's going on.
Yeah, it really bothers me when every single time I find out like little hacks that your brain uses to get around stuff, to literally there's some things that your brain basically does to let's say in the simplest sort of terms, to decrease the amount of data that it needs to process. If you think about it,
so lower the bit rate.
Though, I mean, it's like you actually drop frames in your eyes, but but what your brain does is goes back in time and sort of I think what is it? Is it interpolate? How do you pronounce it? Interpolates those frames to make you think there were frames in there. So when you're moving your head, right, you're not actually really seeing. You're basically like the image would be really blurry when you're moving your head.
I think when you're moving your eye, you mean when you're moving your eye?
Yeah, sorry, when you're moving your eye. Oh, well, actually, no, it could work when you're moving your head. So if let's say you're looking at a clock, right? Well, let's say you're looking away from a clock. You've got a clock that's somewhere. So let's say the clock is over here, and you look at a clock, look away, and then look sort of back at the clock. It looks like the second hand stops for more than a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The reason that it does that is because your brain is filling in.
Your brain lies to you.
Yeah, your brain's filling in the gaps. So it's holding on to that frame of the second hand not moving for a little bit longer than a second because it's not taken in the image. This is not the best explanation of it. I can we'll leave some links to it. A better explanation of this below.
So glad there's an explanation for that because I realized that as a kid and it frustrated me.
It's because your brain basically sort of takes sort of little cuts around.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so you've got a blind spot as well, right? Okay,
I was going to
a few
mention
things.
this. You've got a massive blind spot in your vision.
Yeah,
Where
you
your
can
brain,
find it.
your brain fills in
Mhm.
what's in that area. There's some tests you can probably find on YouTube where you can hold up an object and move it across your field of vision
Mhm.
until it just disappears.
Yeah.
Because your brain doesn't know it's
where
there.
the visual nerve is on the back of the eye.
The optic nerve,
Yeah.
So it's where the optic nerve is on your retina.
Yeah.
There's no way, like that's what's taking in all the information from your
I
retina.
hate that.
There's no way for the light to hit it and sort of react. So there is a blind spot. If you basically move your finger kind
It's
of
somewhere just off.
back, it's kind of like back into the left and right. So you've got it on both both fields of view.
Mm.
And it's mind bending because it's something you've not noticed. Another thing, your nose is constantly in your field of view.
Oh yeah, your
Like,
brain ignores it.
Your brain is just like, it's not there. You don't. It doesn't. You don't.
I hate that it's always there. You can see it.
Like as soon as you notice it, you're like,
I can see my piercing always.
Yeah,
It's in my field of view. That's so weird.
It's just so little things like that. Your brain kind of edits and chops out information.
Yeah.
I think there's some things where okay, if I say nits, you know head lice,
Mm.
right? I guarantee you that now that we're talking about headlights and how
stop
itchy,
it.
your head is,
Itchy.
Oh.
itchy.
if you're listening to this or you're watching this, and you just scratched your head or something. Yeah, that's me tricky. Like that's your brain being like, oh, head lice. Oh, what if I'm itching?
Are there any?
And then you're like that, you know. So often, like,
Curry.
yeah, I mean, so often you get these sort of phantom itches, and all of this is you think about your brain as and your field of and your sort of interpretation of the world as being very literally what is happening in front of you.
Mhm.
It isn't. It really isn't. I mean, even if you don't think about your brain being on a delay because of your reaction time, even outside of that, there's so many little things that your brain just does that makes the world around you not actually the one that you experience.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
Yeah,
We
it's
just got to accept that we can't see the actual world,
yeah,
which is sad.
yeah. It's like kind of being in a fish tank and being like, thinking that experience is exactly what the world is like. That's what it feels
Yeah.
like. Like
Yeah.
you're looking on like
You're just
through a
like,
glass
it's being
or like through a
processed
screen or
through
something.
so many layers of interpretation before it
Yeah.
gets to you.
yeah. I mean, if you think about watching something on TV, how it's not the same as actually being there, even though you still got the sights and the sounds, and you've got a lot of the different things.
Mhm.
That's kind of, you can kind of use that as an analogy for sort of the real world and the world that you experience, because there are so many different things that are just completely lost on you because you can't process them or you can't experience them. You don't have the ways to sense them. That they're actually it's quite similar if you think about what you experience on TV as opposed to being there. That's the
Yeah.
real world compared to what you experience.
For example, you're glowing all the time.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
in a radiation wave that you can't see.
exactly. Yeah,
You're just glowing.
Yeah.
You're like a shiny glowing
guess we are.
object.
constantly
yeah.
infrared radiation.
To a snake,
Reflecting all
you're
the
just a glowing thing walking around.
I'm a glow stick.
Like an
Infrared
angel.
radiation. I mean, if you look, if you look at someone as well, you're constantly losing atoms. Like we think of ourselves as a constant thing, but you're constantly losing atoms. You're breathing in, you're breathing out, you're shedding skin, all of that stuff. You're eating and putting more atoms, like putting more things in. But it's if you look at different scales and you look at ways that you look at things in ways that we can't experience,
Mhm.
the world is very different. It's very odd, and that's a little bit on your brain and how it lies to you.
So, synesthesia?
Synesthesia, yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, so that's synesthesia. Like we've said that it can be brought on by head trauma, strokes, or brain tumors, or psychedelic drugs, meditation, or sensory deprivation. But the sort of main way that we know about it, or the main way that it's studied, is through sort of a genetic component where it's kind of heritable. And in that case, like I said, about 2 to 5% of people have synesthesia. So I did a very scientific poll on Twitter with over 1,000 people that voted in it. So we that's a decent sample size.
That's a lot of people.
It's a fair amount of people. Yeah.
It's more than a lot of scientific studies, anyway.
It's
True.
It's more than a lot of scientific studies about
How many-
synesthesia as well. I've
How
seen
many
some with
people were in that autism vaccine study? It
I
was
think
like
5
people.
5 under 20. I've seen a synesthesia study with 14 people in it. So look, as far as numbers go, 1,000, that's all right. So I put out the question: do you have synesthesia? 17% of people said yes. 83% said no. So
A lot of
12%.
liars.
Yeah,
There are a
12%.
high
Wow.
proportion of synesthetes in our audience.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I think that what a lot of people think of synesthesia isn't actually synesthesia. So for instance, I would say that certain sort of subjects at school subjects have colors.
Yes.
But
100%.
but that associates, like, chemistry is red, biology is green, and physics is obviously blue. Math is also blue, but a different shade from physics.
Yeah, man.
But
Yeah.
that's not
Blue.
synesthesia. I don't see the word maths and experience
Sure.
blue. I just associate maths with blue because
Yeah, math is definitely blue.
I probably had a blue maths textbook at some point.
I had a general science textbook that was red, so I agree that science is red.
Not all science. No.
But
Science.
I never split up the sciences.
Oh, that's
I
weird.
I went from general science to physics, which was also red. So in my mind,
Wrong.
physics is red.
No, physics isn't red.
Incorrect.
No, physics just isn't red. But that's the
Alright.
thing. This isn't synesthesia. This is just
Yeah.
an association. For example, you can associate so many different things with different colors or other experiences because like that's how so sort of memory and smell.
Yeah.
You can associate a smell with
All the time.
a lot of different things, but that's not synesthesia.
Mm.
That's more association through memory. The difference between synesthesia is that it brings on the exact same response as if you were seeing something red in your brain. It's not the same. It's just kind of being like, oh yeah, maths. When I think of maths, I kind of think about yellow a little bit.
Mm.
It's a little more innate than that association because those associations obviously come from experiences. So it's more memory than an innate sort of experience, really.
Yeah.
If that
Like
makes
you
sense.
said, we would have had a textbook.
Yeah,
That would have
you would
been
have
a
had a
certain
textbook or
colour,
something.
yeah.
Yeah, something along those lines. So one interesting thing about synesthetes, among many interesting things, is that apparently they say that they've got really good memory for things like phone numbers, codes, like sort of a lot of different things that involve sort of words or numbers. Because digits, because the sort of digits, letters, and each syllable can be associated with a color. It's the same way that sort of I guess people that do your sort of Guinness World Record for memories.
Yes.
The same way that they do it, except instead of associating it with associating like sort of numbers with colors by memory, you associate them just innately.
Well, what they do in Guinness World Records often, I believe, because I had a look into this to see if I could do it, is they create like at least one of the best memory people. What's the word? Professional memorizers.
Professional memorists
in the world. They use like a mind palace where they visualize walking through a house and all the items, all the numbers are laid around. And that's because that works because we are such visual creatures. We have such a large portion of our brain dedicated to visual understanding and visual memory.
Is this the thing that Sherlock Holmes has?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that this was. I tried doing this and I was like, this is impossible. It's much harder to remember what everything looks like because I can't picture things quite as well. Like if you look at our Aphantasia episode, I can't picture things like sort of
I also
as well.
struggled with this.
So I was like,
tried it.
it's harder for me to remember. Like it says, visualize a room and what's in the drawer and make it the first syllable. And I'm like,
the concept of a room.
Yeah, and I'm trying to focus on where the drawer is, what's in it, and like I'm just like, no, man, that takes more effort. Like,
but I'm guessing this means that synesthetes are able to hook numbers into their visual working, like their visual memory.
Well, that would make sense. Yeah,
probably more dense than a memory for digits, which we haven't necessarily evolved to remember because they're probably newer than the time that our brain has evolved its memory center.
I'll get on to that about something because there is something interesting there that brings in a project I once did. A sort of study that I once ran. I say a study I once ran. This was a study I ran in high school, but it was very scientifically accurate. So, I think so. Synesthetes, they do have really good memories for sort of numbers and digits because it's effectively like remembering the colors of things. It makes it much easier
Mm.
if you've got to remember sort of you've got to remember it by colors. But then also apparently they can make sort of errors, mathematical errors, because certain numbers have the same color. So it's almost like, I would say, sort of being dyslexic, I suppose, where it's harder to differentiate between certain scripts.
Right.
Except in this case, it's harder to differentiate between, say, 9 and 20 because they're kind of similar colors.
Out of interest,
Yeah.
is there any? Are there examples of, or is there any underlying logic to the associations with numbers? For example, like what I'm thinking is, like, for example, are prime numbers always the same color, or is there something we can see about the way our brain maps out associations?
I think all of these, as far as I'm aware, all of the sort of color associations are pretty much unique. So
right,
yeah.
Right.
So I mean, there's no truth to the universe there, in that everyone sees every third prime number as being red.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
Which, if that happened, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Like everyone saw 42 as the exact same color.
Yeah, exactly. I just wondered, like, because I think I could ask Dottie, like, what color is 824, and she'd have an answer.
Yeah.
Like, because it's just innate. She thinks 824, and the brain provides a color.
Yeah.
So I suppose maybe you could use that to determine how an individual's synesthete's mind is mapped based on the colors.
Absolutely. You could see where the connections are, but then that depends whether it's just based up with digits, in which case you'd only have really 10 different colors to associate with.
Well, I wonder, but what I mean is, like, is 8, like, rather than 855 being the color for 8, the color for 5 twice, it may be its own specific color.
Absolutely could be.
Yeah.
I think that with some people it's digit, like clearly what it says here. Some people it's digits, so each digit has its own number, and with others it could be a whole sort of string of numbers.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I can understand why it's something that people say they have, because it's something that it makes you feel interesting, definitely. You know?
Yeah.
But bear in mind that if you say you've got synesthesia, chances are, based on this poll, you probably don't.
Unless we have a very big fan base of synesthetes.
Yeah,
double the normal population size.
Double, try
or triple,
and more than triple. Yeah, okay. 17. It was 2 to 5% of the population.
Okay, so
we had 17%.
Minimum triple.
Minimum
triple and a half.
Yeah.
Maximum 8 times.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. There's a lot of liars.
But then I think that's people not really understanding what synesthesia is. Again,
and we're educating them now.
We are, yeah. So it's not it's not just an association. It's an innate. You see something and you experience it. It's not like you have it. It's not like, oh, I'm not sure. You've got an answer. In the same way that if I look at a red apple, I'm like, that apple is red, bro. that apple is so red. Like,
you cannot convince me otherwise.
If you were to say, no, if I look at an apple, I'm not going to be like, ooh, it's maybe it's a bit red. Maybe it's more of a green. I'm not really. No, that's a red apple. Like, you know. And there are lots of different types of synesthesia. I mean, we've been focusing on grapheme color synesthesia, which is the numbers and colors. But there are lots of different ones. So music color synesthesia, in which musical notes and sounds have colors associated with them, which is incredible. It's like, do you remember the iTunes sort of the iTunes sort of color screen?
Yeah,
I imagine that's what music color synesthetes see whenever they listen to music. You know?
Wait, so is this that music, like specific tones, like notes, are associated with a color, or is it that when listening to music you just get like a Windows Media Player visualization happening in front of your eyes?
I mean, so musical notes and sounds are associated with a color, but because it's the same as experiencing that color.
Yeah.
And if you listen to music, there's lots of different sounds. One would assume it's like like the Windows Movie Player sort of like color thing going on.
I've had that in deep meditation. It's gorgeous.
Well, that's the thing. Synesthesia can be brought on by meditation, so it's likely something along the lines of that.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. There's a load of different ones. I'm just going to rattle through them. There's tactile emotion, in which certain sort of textures make you feel certain emotions. Again, I'm not sure of the scientific viability of all of these, because not all of them have been studied, bear in mind. And obviously with this is something you've just got to go on with someone. If someone says they've got it, there's not really much you can do shy of a brain scan to prove or disprove.
Well, you could ask them what color a number is, or what feeling a surface is, and then ask them like 3 years later, and if it's changed, they're lying.
Yeah, but
Maybe.
Lie.
I mean, that's.
Do you care that much?
Yeah.
Probably not.
I'd
They're
much
not
rather-
claiming disability benefits, are they?
I'd
I'm
much
gonna
rather.
synesthesia.
I'm going to cross-examine you in 3 years.
Mate, I'd much rather just stick him in a brain machine and be like, okay, you're telling the truth, you're lying. You know, that
Yeah.
seems much easier, much quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. But you could do that. So there's tactile emotion, like I said. So that's where sort of feelings and feelings overlap. So there's sound, color, as I've said, flavor, temperature, flavor, sound, smell, time units, and colors. So
What?
yeah, that's an odd one.
Time units.
Time units.
Like seconds, minutes, hours.
Yeah, I suppose like so. Different sort of periods of time. Like okay, so different sort of periods of time have different.
Oh, it's like
sort of
different
colours.
eras of time.
I guess it's difficult
So you could
to
say like the 80s are a certain color.
sure. I mean,
Oh.
again, this is a broad thing that not all of it has really been studied. I know some people that have said that like they've got a different visualization for how time works. So like time feels like a sort of circle, or it feels like like different months of the year have a different place in their head.
Mm.
That is mapped out almost visually.
Mm.
If that makes sense.
Like a calendar.
Yes, like a calendar.
Or a clock.
Yes, like a calendar or a clock, but
Yeah.
like more innate and mental
Yeah,
rather
sure.
than.
No, I'm not.
yeah.
I'm not.
Yes, when I picture the days of the month, I picture lots of little squares inside of a slightly larger square.
Woo, it's
I wonder where I got this from.
Yes,
Mm.
and then when the month is over, suddenly the original square disappears and is replaced by a new square. It's amazing.
Wow.
hmm
Where does it go? Don't know, but it's back 12 squares
Yeah,
later.
it's back after it just rolls back.
What this is so fascinating about this, which it reveals about, like, because you were saying, Corey, about how the world that you think is the world is not really the world in your head, right? And what's so fascinating about this is that we think of like sight and sound and touch as like very distinct things, but when you actually experience them, once they reach your brain, they're just different frequencies of vibration, essentially, aren't they? They're different currents of electricity. So like your eyes
Oh, well, yeah, I wouldn't say that those are different frequencies of vibration. If it's electricity, it's a little bit.
Right. So all I mean is that you touch a surface and that gets turned into an electric signal.
Yeah.
And your eyes receive light and turn that into an electric signal, and your ears receive sound and turn that into electric signal. And so all those things are reaching your brain and reaching you as electric signals, and those signals will have amplitude or frequency or whatever. And so it's not, if those wires get crossed, that I assume is one theory as to where this comes from, is that these electrical signals are ultimately all the things you think of as 6 or blue or the feeling of a duvet or whatever are just electrical signals.
Yeah, so
in the end,
if you figure out how to map someone, so okay, I mean, conceivably, if you figure out how someone's brain is mapped exactly down to the neuron, you could stimulate each individual, and stimulation would literally just be like little shock probably, but you could stimulate individual. And this is if you had the technology to do so. You could stimulate each individual part of the brain and make someone experience anything. I mean, that's one of the reasons that people say we could be in a simulation wherein you're basically just a brain in a jar. And there's no way of disproving that, really, because if you have a brain in a jar and you have a way to manipulate everything that all of the inputs to that brain, you don't need ears, eyes, or anything. All you need is a computer and something to feed those electric signals into the brain. And functionally, it's the same thing as living in reality. Which is horrifying.
From synesthesia to existential crisis. So guys,
hey,
everything you're experiencing is just electricity.
Everything is a lie. Woo!
Even us.
Yeah.
We are sound.
So this is one of those things where so you've got frogs or mollusks or whatever that are dead, and you can put a little bit of something on them, and they'll start twitching and dancing, because it all comes down to electric potential and electricity. Yeah, your muscles move, because of a little bit of electricity. They sort of tense up and stuff. That's why when you get an electric shock,
or do they move, Corey? Do you just get the experience of a muscle moving from the simulation probe implanted in your brain?
Which is mental, because when you think about phantom limb, the sort of the phantom limb sort of thing, wherein say you lose a limb, and you still feel it there as though it is there, and you get those feelings and it feels like it's actually there because I think in some cases you've still got those sort of the ends of the nerves, And if something sort of interacts with that, it still sends a signal to your brain, and your brain is like, oh yes, that's where hand is. Hand is feeling this, and you're looking at your arm, and you're like,
no hand.
but hand gone. And brain is like, no, bro, I'm pretty sure hand is there because
that
I've got
hand
the
up
signal
to?
for hand being there. So that like you get this sort of feeling of having a limb there where you don't anymore. It's just your brain is
weird.
Yeah, your brain is very complex, but ultimately very simple, if that makes sense.
It's based on simple things, but there's just so much complexity to those simple things.
It's uncomplicated, but it's incredibly complex. It's arranged in such a way that a brain itself can't just look at a brain and understand it. I mean, a brain itself can't look at anything because it's a brain, but a brain itself can't just understand a brain, despite the fact that
the brain can use the eyes to interpret what is there.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I think one of the things I love thinking about is sort of sci-fi stories wherein humans have, and this comes into senses. I love thinking about sci-fi stories where humans have more senses than some aliens. So if you think about humans, if you were to describe them sort of kind of abstractly from someone that has never met one before, you could say that they're able to sense chemicals in the air. They have a way of like they've got chemical receptors that they can pick out chemicals, a single drop of a single sort of say drop of a chemical in however many gallons of air from across vast distances, and have a vast memory bank of all of these different chemicals. And so if you want to use poisonous gas, you got to make sure that it's one that they can't detect, because otherwise they'll know and they'll just walk away. It's all like, and that's smell. That's your sense of smell, and taste really as well. Like there's so many different senses that you've got that are incredible. Like the sense of smell is amazing. But we don't think of it as being one that we heavily rely on, because we've got sort of vision that we really focus on as our main sense, even though our vision isn't very. It's useful for what we need it for. It definitely works, but it's not very good when it comes to all the wavelengths of light that exist. It's like you've got a tiny little sliver of the pie, and like there's a whole sort of bake off of other baked goods there. That's what visible light is in comparison to the electromagnetic spectrum.
I watched an interview with a deaf person once who was talking about how it was incredible that we people with hearing could hear something coming before we could see it. From their perspective, they're like, that's a superpower.
That's magic,
That's magic. How do you know something's coming before you can see it? And you know what it is as well. You know it's a car or a bird or a plane or something.
Yeah. I mean,
we'd never consider that.
I've been looking into whiskers recently. For my I do this. So sometimes so I make other videos elsewhere about other little things. Sometimes I'll just get stuck in a hole of being like, what are whiskers for?
What?
Yeah.
And
Why are they a thing?
And I'll just dive deep into it. Rats can almost sort of hear through their whiskers.
What?
Hear?
Yeah, basically. So like because of the different, so they've got whiskers arranged in a specific pattern, and there's also a sort of pattern in their brain that responds to each whisker. So that's to simply put it. It's sort of the whiskers are mapped out in their brain, and the whiskers are sort of, they say, longer towards the back and shorter towards the front. And in the same way that a guitar string has a resonant frequency, so a wider or longer guitar string has a different frequency that it vibrates at compared to a shorter one. These whiskers have different frequencies that they vibrate at. So when an incoming sound hits those whiskers, they all vibrate differently based on the wavelength of the sound. And rats can figure out the sort of wavelength of sound from that, figure out the wavelength of vibration. So it's not just for feeling. So rats can feel texture. They can feel apparently the different texture of different grades of sandpaper using their whiskers. That's how sensitive they are. But they can also apparently use them to discern sort of sounds. So it's an extra pair of ears, sort of. And
I thought it was purely for like spatial awareness or something.
That's what a lot of animals use them for. That's what cats and dogs use them for as well. But also for sort of looking around the ground at night, you can feel with your whiskers, and you can tell the shape, size, movement of an object using whiskers. And pretty much all mammals have them. We're the only ones that really don't. It's even manatees. Apparently, every hair on a manatee is a whisker.
Imagine if you could hear with your mustache.
Well,
because that's what rats are doing. They have a mustache.
Maybe some
they
people
can hear
can.
with it.
Should try getting a mustache.
So this is the thing. You say, "Oh, imagine you could hear with your mustache." You can kind of hear with your fingers, can't you? Like
no,
a little. You can feel vibrations, and you can sense the different.
Those aren't mapped to my audio
they're not.
sensory part of my brain.
I don't know if rats are either, but it's still that same sense of interpreting sound in a completely different way. I think it's incredible. Like our senses are absolutely incredible, and we never really give them much credit. I think, like the sense of sound, being able to hear things, like you can, because you've got 2 ears, you can locate where things are just based on
around you as well.
Yeah, just around you based on a sound. Humans can learn to echolocate. Like there are blind people that use use literal echolocation by going, and you can hear basically the sound bouncing back and figure out where things are. I think I saw this video of a man who was blind, completely blind, and can ride a bike without crashing.
Wow.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, purely through just, and then you hear where things are. I mean, if you think about it, you can kind of do that. Like when you close your eyes, you can still kind of make your way through a room.
Yes.
If you know, you can still kind of tell where things are
from the memory of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that like you don't think about this very often, but your senses are much stronger than you give them any credit for.
Mm-hmm.
We rely heavily on sight, but if you were to knock out sight, you'd focus more on the other ones, and you can
Put
still
more
get by.
attention into hearing and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's incredible, I think, and all because a little organism had a light sensing patch on it at one point. They grew into eyes. It's mental.
We can work with this.
Yeah, we got this, bro. So yeah, that's that was all the different sort of kinds of synesthesia, personality, smell, and onto grapheme color, which, as I've said, is the most heavily studied one. Which makes sense because it's very easy to study. It's two very simple concepts that are related to each other very consistently. And there's no debate whether a 6 is a 6. Like a 6 is always a 6, but if something is, say, soft, that's less of a strict definition, So if you're trying to study one, if you're trying to study the sort of texture color one, you're not really going to get the same results as if you say, just look at the number 6. It's fair. It's much more straightforward, much more scientific.
Yeah. Would there be one for taste in color? Because I imagine that's what Remy had in Ratatouille.
Yeah.
If you've not seen Ratatouille, every time it's like a little rat and he's a chef. Every time he cooks something and eats it, there's like little lights that flash up in his brain.
Yeah, that was a way.
Very good film.
Yeah, brilliant film. Sort of visually.
But I imagine that's what he has.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
If I was to analyze Remy.
Remy is synesthete.
I mean, he is. I mean, he is.
But
Yeah.
He even tries to get his brother to do it, and his brother just can't visualize anything.
Wow.
Yeah, which is I think that's brings us onto another really interesting thing of like, so film is a medium in which you have two senses to work with. Obviously, they're the sort of two main senses that most people use, sight and sound, but it's two senses to work with, and we've got a whole load of other ones. So with film, you find people a lot of the time visually representing or using sound to represent things that you can only sort of smell, taste, or feel. And you could argue that synesthetes some synesthetes might have a better time at that because they actually do see and or hear. Or have sounds or sights associated with those other senses. So it's something interesting. I'd like to see someone that's a synesthete make a film and see what happens there.
Be cool.
Yeah, it would be cool. Yeah. So grapheme color synesthesia, as I've said, that's the most common one that we've studied. Effectively, as I've said, you see a number or you see a letter and it's associated with a color. So we did some studies on grapheme color synesthesia. If you were to ask someone with grapheme color synesthesia to read out, say, the color of ink that a word was printed in, say that it was boat written in blue ink, you would have to say the word blue. If it was car written in green ink, you'd have to say the word green. Now, if the word boat is associated with a different color in that person's brain, then you'll notice a slight sort of delay between them saying
or they'll hesitate.
Yeah, there'll be a sort of
color,
there'll be a noticeable delay as opposed to when those colors match up with the sort of colors of the words. And this is actually kind of interesting because it's similar to the Stroop effect. Have you guys heard of the Stroop effect?
Nope.
I have not. No.
You've not heard of the Stroop effect?
No.
Okay. I did a project on this in my final project in high school in biology was on the Stroop effect. Effectively, it's a case of
I know what this is.
Yeah? Go ahead.
Well, I think I know what this is. Is it when you get somebody to read, say, yellow, but it's in red ink, or that you get some to read green, but it's in blue ink? And
I have done these
that
tests.
being a difficult thing to do, and it's processed in the brain in a funny way.
Yeah, so effectively, we find that there's a kind of delay, a similar sort of delay, when you ask someone to read a color that's written in a different color of ink. But basically what it points to is the fact that we read better than we
Recognize
colors.
Yeah.
So if you, which is insane, if you're asking someone to say the color that the color word is printed in. So you've got yellow printed in red. You want the person to say red. Their brain automatically is like, oh, that says yellow, and then it's got to be like, oh, but it's written in red.
No.
Yeah.
Can't say yellow.
And that's where the delay comes
We
from.
compulsively read.
Yeah, like actually,
we can't help it.
That's mad because we created language as well.
yeah, but our brains are so incredibly wired for it. It's actually very annoying. So I'm able to look out of the sort of peripheral of my vision and see the SCI GUYS logo, and instantly my brain says SCI GUYS. I didn't want to read that. There was nothing.
Yeah.
There was nothing of me saying, "Hey, I should read this." It's just my brain is like SCI GUYS, in the same way that I like, sort of look at Luke and I recognize face.
Is that because, do you think that's innate in our biology, or is it because we practice reading? It's like one of the main things we practice for our entire childhood and adolescence is reading.
I think it's because, I think it's in the same way that you see faces all the time. You see words literally everywhere, and you practice reading so much.
But what I mean is, so in the way you see faces everywhere is because our brains have evolved to see faces. But the way we read compulsively is that innate, or is it because we've practiced it?
So what I mean is that our brains have evolved to see faces, but we see faces all the time. So you still
Right.
practice understanding faces. Do you know what I mean?
So if you lived on an island on your own, you wouldn't see faces everywhere.
No, I think you would, because our brains are still geared towards spotting faces.
Yeah.
But in terms of the reading, the way that would work, I think it's more that you spend more time reading, and you read a lot to the point where reading is almost instantaneous. You do it without
kind of
thinking.
like just really advanced pattern recognition.
Yeah, I think it's something. I mean,
to the point where you can do it like that, and you can see all of the symbols and piece together the
yeah,
word.
I think the way that your brain, so it's less sort of, I think it's less sort of evolution, and this is based on the studies that I was doing on it. I say studies as though they were as though they were very deep. This is based on the stuff that I researched for it about 5 years ago. But I think it's more the fact that your brain, less evolution of the human brain, and more development of an individual brain, wherein you are constantly reading and trying to understand words, and that's such a big part that your brain sort of your brain develops around that, in a sense.
You've
like
trained
there's a specific part of your brain that is there's a specific part of your brain that deals with language, and there's also a specific part of your brain that deals with reading. However, recognizing the colors of objects and saying what color that object isn't it's not exactly linked directly with the sort of language centers of your brain.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're able to sort of innately read things and turn that into language and understand that. Whereas you're able to instantly recognize what color something is. Like, I know instantly looking at something that's purple, I know that that's purple, but I don't initially think.
It's not often you're asked
to say
the color you see, and so whatever portion of your visual cortex is figuring out colors doesn't have a very quick highway to your language center that then speaks.
Yeah.
So it's having to take a longer route round. So the part of you that's reading has already passed the information to your vocal cords before the part of you that's seeing.
Well, yeah, not necessarily to your vocal cords, but to the part of your brain.
Center,
yeah. So like, and fundamentally, like you're experiencing color all of the time. Like that's not to say that you read quicker than you understand what color something is. That's just to say that you read quicker than you can understand a color and then name that color. Because it's almost as though there's an extra step there. But
right.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting in that you've got a similar thing to the Stroop effect, wherein it's harder for someone to say the wrong color because their brain interprets sort of, say, like certain words as certain colors.
So when you're saying that if you write, say, car in a color that isn't the color that somebody associates with car, if they have synesthesia, that means that the part of their brain that associates a concept with a color is happening even faster than. Sorry, no.
It's more of the fact that you've got to. There's two different kinds of information that are coming in. So you're looking at the word car written in green ink, and your brain is saying that's written in green ink. But then there's also another part of your brain that's saying I'm experiencing red. I'm reading car, and I experience car as red. So while you're visually seeing green, you're also experiencing red. So your brain's kind of got to be like,
there's a clash.
Wait, is it green or is it
Yeah.
which one of these is the one that it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's how we know that it's a physical structure in the brain that's doing it, is because we can see that happen.
Well, it's not so much that we can see that happen. This is inferred. So this is inferred from the fact that there's a delay.
Yeah.
So and when I say a delay, it's not something that is necessarily incredibly noticeable. This is something that they've noticed with through studying it. So there's a slight hesitancy there, and all of the rest of that stuff is sort of inferred. So basically, what that's saying, it's heavily simplified, is that you've got two conflicting sort of forms of information in your head, and there's a slight delay while your brain resolves which one is the correct output from the input. And I would hesitate to sort of say that definitely means that there's the structural influence, that definitely means this and that. It really, all it means is that there's a delay. And we've kind of inferred that from the rest of what we know.
But it means that there's a difference than people who don't have synesthesia, because people who don't have synesthesia wouldn't have any conflicting information. Because unlike the study you did in school, where you have the word yellow and the color green, this is the word car and the color green.
Yeah.
And so somebody without synesthesia wouldn't have any conflicting information there.
What it does is sort of it sort of proves that synesthesia is something that this kind of synesthesia is something that people experience. Either that, or there's some completely unbeknownst to us explanation for it that has eluded our understanding.
Yeah.
But realistically, what it kind of shows us is that yes, grapheme color synesthesia is something that people actually experience, to the point that they actually experience the word car as whatever color, even in opposition to that word being written in a completely different color.
That's so exciting, because it's something that, like you say, how could we, like, that's a way we can actually test and verify that it's actually happening for something that's ultimately purely subjective. I mean, like, we could maybe do an MRI scan to see different areas of the brain lighting up, but it's such a wonderful thing to have something that seems so bizarre. And like, if you had a kid who was saying this, you'd be like, what are you talking about? And see that there's actually something going on there, and you can prove that it's there. That's wonderful. So cool.
So it's so cool. It's really cool. But yeah, I think basically what it shows is that synesthesia is automatic, and that's what we were saying, that there are some people that have associations, but true synesthesia is actually an automatic response.
Something you can't turn off, because I can conceptualize like math, for example, without thinking of blue.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I guess someone with synesthesia would like link the two inherently.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the way to test is to figure out all of the associations that you've got with different things, and have someone generate some kind of test for you based on that. And if you were to do it honestly, you probably wouldn't have synesthesia, because you associate those things, but you don't experience the color. Like, you don't truly sort of experience the color when you see it. And I just want to reiterate that it's not seeing sort of, say, maths written in blue ink. When you read maths in black ink, you're like, oh, that looks like it's written in blue ink. It's more a case of like, you see maths and you experience the concept of blue. Yeah. Which is, it's a very bad thing.
And you can't avoid it.
No, you can't. Yeah. Honestly, the concept of color is very difficult, because you can, it's like trying to explain red to someone that is blind and has always been blind. You try and explain the color red without you can't say, oh, strawberries or fire. You don't explain things that are that color. Explain what the color red conceptually is to you. And it's basically impossible for us, but for someone that's got synesthesia, they'd probably say whatever thing is associated with red.
This must be, on a low level, quite a distressing thing in a world where fonts are often put in colors, and like, you'll see words and concepts that you see as a color and that will not be in that color. And that creates, like, at least on some low level, I'm not saying that they're like going through a suffering all the time because of it, but it creates cognitive dissonance. Like, I mean, quite frequently, I would imagine.
Yeah, but then I'm not going nuts in Star Wars because I see someone drinking blue milk. You know what I mean? Like, I associate.
Sorry, what?
I'm not going nuts when I watch Star Wars and see someone drinking blue milk. Like, I associate milk as being something that's white. But seeing
Luke Skywalker drinks blue milk.
Luke Skywalker drinks blue milk.
He does.
Cool. Okay, I've seen maybe like half of Star Wars, and don't pay attention very much.
Blue. Okay.
Oh, good God.
But
What if
that-
I associated milk as red? I'd be having a dreadful time.
If you're like,
Yeah.
this is not realistic Star Wars.
But my point is that you could like experience something as you could experience two things as being connected, but that doesn't necessarily mean that seeing if words written down in different colors is going to upset you.
Okay.
It's more that it's something that's kind of happening in your brain where you can see something written in green and experience red.
And only if you were
If that
asked
makes
to
sense.
name the color
But
would that be annoying.
But it wouldn't be annoying so much as again, these are sort of slight hesitations. Not even some. It's not like you're sitting there thinking, "Oh, is that green or is it red?" This is all kind of background in your brain where it's like quickly going through the pathways of. I mean, the thing is with the Stroop effect. If you were to test yourself on the Stroop effect, you could notice that you could notice that it could be a bit difficult for some of them. But in some cases, you can just rattle through it.
Yeah.
But some people can rattle through it, some people can't. But I think you need to think of this less as a case of like looking at it and being like, oh, which one is it? And more in the background, your brain being like, I'm visually seeing that this is written in red ink, but I'm experiencing the color green at the same time.
Yeah.
And then it's just quickly deciding that it's got to go down the pathway of like, oh no, I'm seeing it in green, but I'm seeing it in whatever color but I'm experiencing a secondary color.
Yeah. All I mean is that's more stressful than in your daily life. That's more stressful than that not being present at all.
I wouldn't say that necessarily.
Really?
Well,
Okay.
because
I find cognitive dissonance very stressful.
Yeah, but then stressful would imply that it's kind of at the forefront of your mind, or it's somewhere in there that it's affecting you.
Right.
Whereas if you're bad at maths, having to do maths is gonna having to do small sums is gonna impede you slightly, but it's not gonna necessarily stress you out. You know, I don't know. I think making the leap to saying it's more stressful is not necessarily. It's not substantiated necessarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
I look forward to our 17% Synesthete audience commenting saying it's actually very stressful.
So there's sort of visual perception tasks that people generally use for things. So let's say trying to find the letter S or the letter A among like row upon row of the letter S.
Mm-hmm.
Quite difficult because if they're all the same color, they don't look too dissimilar. Trying to find a different letter amongst one letter, like a large group of one other letter, is quite difficult. But
Like a word search.
Yeah, well, kind of like a word search, but just
or like one of those tweets where it's like loads of the same emoji and then one slightly different emoji.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
because they're all the same colors and all of that, it's quite difficult. Whereas if we were to say trying to find a blue A amongst green S's, you just look for the
quite
blue
easy.
one. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty straightforward. You're just like, well, all of these aren't blue and this one is blue, so I'm pretty sure this is the blue A. So obviously that makes it easier. So you'd assume that with people with synesthesia, that they'd find it much easier to find, say, an A amongst S's compared to people without synesthesia.
I wouldn't.
Why wouldn't you?
Because until they see the A, they don't see it as a different color.
But they do see the A. They just
Their brain just, oh, what?
no. But if you think about it, like you're seeing your brain skims over a lot of stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as soon as you see your brain sort of registers an A shape,
It projects the color on
you'll
the top of it.
experience the color.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So basically, so what it says here, when you're shown that, you find that the synesthete could quickly find the target because for them the target is one color.
So they actually can.
Yeah.
They can find it faster than the average person.
This is based on the study. This is based on a study. That I found.
What?
So yeah, if we're trusting this study,
That's fascinating.
in this study. So okay, I don't want to necessarily say this applies to everyone, but in this study that I
Right.
found, which again is linked in the description, that's what they found, which is pretty cool.
That is
It
so
is because
cool.
that's another example of what we were saying earlier
a
about how
superpower.
your brain is filtering out information, and your brain does receive all of your visual data, and then it doesn't necessarily hand that over to your conscious self. But in the case where it has seen a letter and categorized it as a color, even if you normally wouldn't be able to find it, because the color is projected on the information that you see as a feeling, you find it faster than the average. That is amazing.
Yeah, I mean
It's like a superpower.
it's not like I'd hesitate to think of it as though you're looking at the things and seeing a bright green A.
Yeah.
No, I'm not saying that you're
Yeah,
saying that at all.
yeah.
Just for the people listening, I wouldn't necessarily think of it as that, but just remember that it'd be much easier to find it if you suddenly think of orange when you see the letter A. Because if you think about it, when you're looking through these things, the number of times that you scan through it over and over again, and you're like, okay, that letter can't be here because I've scanned through this 4 times and I can't find it. Then you scan through it the 5th time and find out, oh wait, no, I've just been overlooking it. You're much less likely to overlook something if when you're scanning through it, another color pops into your brain. You know?
Sure.
So yeah, that's sort of synesthesia. But how does synesthesia work? Luke, answer my question.
I think it works by having anomalous brain pathways that aren't there in people without synesthesia between centers of the brain.
How does synesthesia work?
Magic.
Okay, both of you you're not. Neither of you are very far off.
Excuse me.
I think I was a bit closer, to be fair.
Well, here's the thing. Any technology or anything
indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, indistinguishable from magic. I can't say indistinguishable. That's a very difficult word for me just to say offhand.
Synesthesia.
Indistinguishable. Word that I've got a really difficult time with is description, which is annoying because I've got to say it every single week. Yeah, description.
I can't spell guaranteed. I've never been able to spell guaranteed.
I say it in my head. Guaranteed.
Guaranteed. Yeah, that doesn't help. I've done that for many years.
Wow.
Doesn't help.
Wow. Well, maybe you can come up with a mnemonic device. Like for
I struggled with necessary for a while because I didn't know how many S's, how many C's. Didn't know what was going on. I had to sit down one day and be like, okay, I'm going to write it out over and over and over again, and then I got it.
Never eat cabbage, eat slug sandwiches, and remain young. Necessary.
Thanks, Corey.
Yeah. Wish I knew that when I was in school.
I've never had trouble spelling necessary, but my teacher told us that when we were in primary school, and I've been unable to forget it.
Teacher told me that. I got to high school still getting it wrong.
I don't even think I needed it. That's the issue. It's just stuck in my brain, despite the fact that it's completely useless information.
It's like Mississippi, MISSISSIPPI.
Yeah, Mrs. M, Mrs. What is it from Matilda? Mrs. M, Mrs. I, Mrs. S, S, I, Mrs. P, Mrs. I don't know. It doesn't help me spelling Mississippi.
MISSISSIPPI. I just know that.
It doesn't help me spelling Mississippi though. But yeah.
Anyway,
synesthesia. Yeah. So you're both about right in that we don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was wrong because I came up with a theory, in which case I'm wrong.
But one of your theories, the theory you came up with, one of your theories is a theory.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, and so I mean, you're both equally right in that we don't know. And if we don't know, it's basically magic.
We are equally right. How do you feel about being equally right as me?
You should go into theoretical physics.
I really should.
And when asked
my answer for everything.
How does the black hole create magic?
Well,
correct answer for now.
My theory is that it's magic.
If you try to explain Hawking radiation to most people,
sure,
it's basically magic.
I was just reading about Hawking radiation.
It's interesting. I love it. I don't understand it. I'm trying, but it's
sure. Yeah.
It's like magic, but Harry Potter magic. Like I can wrap my head around it a little bit. I kind of understand it, but still fundamentally, it's basically magic, isn't it? It's basically magic.
Functionally magic.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like if you were to take an iPhone to a caveman, okay, well, they wouldn't understand that.
Most people today don't know how iPhones work.
That's what I was going to say. If you're to take an iPhone to someone about 100 years ago and try to explain to them how it works, you'd be like, well, you see, the thing is about it sends signals, and I don't know. Like, it's basically magic.
Yeah.
Like, it's basically magic to most people.
I have people in my life who've said that they don't know how Wi-Fi works, and so that in their universe, in their conceptual universe, it's actually magic. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Like, I mean,
wow.
Like, I get how Wi-Fi works. Like when I think about it, like conceptually I understand it, but
day
also
to day, it's just magic.
Yeah, but literally day to day, my brain is just like, it's magic. It just does it. Like I guess like
gives me internet on my tiny tablet.
How does my brick do my job and also connect me to everyone I love?
True.
I don't know. It doesn't really matter. It's just magic. So some scientists think that actually everyone, like I said before, everyone is born with synesthesia, and that's because those areas of the brain are all quite highly connected, and then as you grow, they become more segregated. So that's sort of one theory, that everyone is initially synesthetic, but that you kind of grow out of it as your brain develops and each part kind of.
That's interesting. So that sort of suggests that we sort of like our brain maps to the world we're born in and kind of go like formed connections that are found to be helpful and throws out connections that aren't helpful, like how you lose the ability to make certain sounds. You're born being able to make every sound from every language, but you lose the ability to make sounds that aren't helpful for the language you are around. Because you never use them, and then you get situations where people from certain countries can't say the sounds that other languages use.
This is one of my favorite things. One of my favorite things. So often you hear sort of you hear, and this you hear this a lot in sort of racist accents with people making fun of sort of Japanese people or for not being able to differentiate L's and R's or getting them mixed up. But while that is quite racist, the reason that that sort of people that speak Japanese have a difficulty discerning L's from R's is because in their language there's no distinct sort of letter. I can't pronounce the letter myself because I don't speak Japanese.
Right.
But it's kind of almost a combination between L and R. When you think of L and R, they're actually very similar, similarly formed in your mouth.
Lani, Laurel, Yanni, Laurel.
But then, so yeah,
that's why. But yeah.
Yeah. But so in Japanese, there isn't a distinction between those letters, and so when you're listening, when a Japanese person is say listening, their brain doesn't differentiate those letters very much, and they're not able to necessarily create those mouth movements in the same way that if English speakers were to listen to Chinese, say Mandarin, which is a tonal language, which uses different tones to differentiate between literally the same sound but different tones.
Yeah,
we can't really do that. It's very difficult for us to do that. It's kind of the same way, and you find that amongst lots of different languages, like the glottal stop, the sort of the sort of sound. That's very present in lots of languages, but in English, it's not really there. So it's very difficult for us to just produce that sound on command.
Yeah. The letter V is less present in many European languages as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's less present in German, I think. So they say W instead of V.
So German V is F, I think.
What?
Vogel.
Okay, so it's just different sounds. They still have the sound, but it's different letters.
German is, so German, when you see the letter V, I think it's pronounced like an F, Vice. Yeah, and W is pronounced like V.
Right.
Yeah.
You also have languages where,
and Z, the letter Z is more of a DZ, like with a DZ. That's what I was taught when I was learning German, at least.
You also have languages and cultures around the world where they don't have as many color distinctions as we do. So you have and they also have color distinctions that we can't see, or between, say, red and blue. We'd just make that a kind of browny, muddy color, but they might be able to see more clarity between different colors. So based on, I think, what kind of fruits they have, or the kind of world they have to go around.
I think usually there's a distinction between red, blue, and yellow. I think that's pretty much
right.
I think the basic colors are generally red, blue, and then another one. But the distinction usually comes in with sort of green. So I think in some languages there's no different word for green. Green is just a different shade of blue, which makes sense. Green is very bluey. So you've kind of got, you either have, say, sort of water blue or leaf blue, I guess.
Wow, yeah.
I think this is not specifically what it is necessarily called in that language. But then you've also got things in English, where in English the reason that an orange is called an orange is because it's orange. But the color orange came after the fruit orange. Before that, orange was just red. Okay,
before we conceptualized orange, it was just red.
So before that, we called the color orange. It was just a different shade of red.
Right.
Because if you think about it,
light red.
And that, speaking of light red, pink.
Pink is light red.
Pink is light red. We differentiate pink. It doesn't have its own sort of distinct wavelength. Pink is just a light shade of red. And in lots of languages, they don't have a word for pink because you don't need a word for pink. It's just light red. It's like if we had a specific sort of word for a light shade of, I was going to say a light shade of purple. We've got indigo and violet. But if you had a specific word for a light shade of sort of blue, so sort of say baby blue had its own specific word, and that was treated as a completely different color to blue. Yeah, that's the same as pink and red. It's functionally the same thing. And it's so interesting how different languages are influence the ways that that your brain operates. So it's kind of one of those things. Does the language that you learn does the language that you learn sort of influences the way that you understand and think? Yeah. So this is another great one. I think so in Mandarin. I think it's Mandarin. Days time kind of goes up and down, whereas for us time goes sort of from left to right. Yeah. So if you think about days of the week, they kind of go from left to right, right?
Yeah.
Whereas apparently, I think in Mandarin, it kind of time goes from, you describe time as going from sort of top to bottom. So if you were to ask people who speak Mandarin to arrange the words morning, noon, and night if they were on different pieces of paper. Morning, noon, and night, they'd more often arrange them morning on the top, noon in the middle, and night on the bottom. Whereas if you were asked to ask an English speaker, they'd arrange it morning, noon, and night from left to right.
Left to right.
Supposedly. And that could be the way that could be from the way that we read. I'm not sure exactly where that comes from, but that is another thing. Like the way you conceptualize things is heavily influenced by your brain. And if you were to say take scripts that are read from right to left, you'd find a lot of differences there between languages that read from left to right, like ours.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
It's crazy. Like the way that you see the world is heavily influenced by the language that you speak. And not just in simple things, not in sort of say simple things, but in more complex things in the way that sort of turns of phrase are used or like the way that things are described, but also just very simple concepts like color, which you wouldn't think would be influenced by language, but very heavily are. Sounds that you can make with your mouth, literally based on what sounds are needed in your language. It's absolutely fantastic, to be honest. So back onto how synesthesia works. Yeah. So we've got lots of different ideas. Basically, they're sort of the ideas of either sort of feedback in the brain. So you see a color and there's sort of feedback. You see a word and that sort of feeds back. There's sort of feedback there that makes you experience a color.
Feedback like how if you hold a microphone up to a speaker.
Yeah, hold it. Yeah, that sort of feedback. Yeah. Okay, so if you hold microphones up to speakers, you get that weird noise. That's because you can explain it better than I can. Yeah.
The signal is basically recording itself, and it amplifies constantly until you just get like a
really quickly as well.
Or when, let's say, if you have a mobile phone and you hold it next to a sort of wire that you're recording something from, you're not able to. Can we do it?
That's not the same thing as feedback.
Yeah, I know, but it's
well, if you get two phones that are right next to each other and you call the phones. Yeah.
So, but then also, there's also the sort of like this is another theory where it's similar to sort of like if you hold a phone, if you're recording something and you hold something that's giving off some sort of an electric signal, an electromagnetic signal next to it, you'll hear it picking up a bit of that, a bit of interference there,
a bit of crackle.
Yeah, a bit of crackle, and that's another theory for that. There's also a theory of sort of crossed neural connections as well.
So that sounds similar to. Like we were saying, like that sounds similar to the photic sneezing effect, where like a signal, like an electric signal, kind of jumps across wires.
Yeah,
because they're so close to each other.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've got all these different ideas for how it could work, but we just don't know how it actually does work. And that's what you get when you're studying the brain, really.
Don't know why.
It's very complex, and when it comes to something like understanding color. It needs a lot more study, but yeah, that's kind of synesthesia. That's the whole story on it. What do you guys think? Any closing thoughts?
I want to meditate more.
You want to meditate more? Yeah.
Yeah. I want to experience it.
Yeah, I would recommend properly. I would recommend that if you want to experience synesthesia, sensory deprivation.
I was just about to say
or meditation.
Go to a little tank.
Not any of the other ones.
Line a tank.
The head trauma, the psychedelics.
No, don't.
Probably not a good idea. Don't give yourself a stroke. That's not advisable.
There are better ways to go about getting synesthesia.
100%. Sci Guys do not endorse strokes, psychedelics, or head trauma. But this week's episode was brought to you by our lovely, lovely patrons over at patreon.com/Sci Guys.
Yes, it absolutely was.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. So just to give you guys a little rundown on what happens over at patreon.com/Sci Guys is every single month our patrons get to vote on a topic that is submitted by other patrons. And we do that topic. This is one of those topics. You also get bonus episodes. You get some extra content. Sometimes you get things a little bit early. You get lots and lots of things over there at Patreon.
You get to watch the live shows.
You get to watch the live shows whenever you want.
Whenever you want.
Not available anywhere else. On demand, exactly. It's like a streaming service, except much, much better.
Netflix, but for Sci Guys. It's just Sci Guys.
Yeah, and Netflix, the problem you got with Netflix is that you can never decide what to watch. With Sci Guys, you always know.
You don't have a choice.
You don't have that.
You don't have a choice.
So head over to patreon.com/Sci Guys and join our lovely Patreon family because they really are lovely.
Indeed.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So that's not all you get if you sign up to our Patreon. What you also get is every single month, we'll put your name on screen as a little sort of credits roll.
Here it is.
Here it is. There you go. Look at that. These are all of our patrons. But also, if you join up to Patreon right now, you'll get to be read out as a new patron every month. So every single month we read out new joining patrons. And
so who are the new patrons this month?
Who are the new patrons this month? I'll tell you.
Who's joined the SCI GUYS family?
We've got Rihari. So thank you, Rihari,
Thank
for joining.
you, Rihari.
We've got Meredith.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you, Meredith.
Legend.
And Caro Bus or Caro Boos. But thank you all for being patrons. And we'll see you guys all next month, won't we?
Catch you next month.
I mean, we'll see you next week as well, but you know.
We've also got a bonus episode coming out soon.
Oh, yeah. Do you know, we'll see you lots. We'll see you again.
We'll see you plenty of times.
Thank you for watching. You can find the full references for this episode in the description. Subscribe for new episodes every Sunday. And why not leave us a nice wee comment? You can support the pod at patreon.com/SciGuys or find and contact us at SciGuysPod on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Or you can send us an email at SciGuysPod@gmail.com. I am not Corey everywhere.
I'm Jamkin everywhere.
I'm Luke Cutforth everywhere.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Adios.